Hey, everybody, it's Becky Drose. Thank you for joining me again on the Girl HR podcast. So often, when I am talking and I have guests on, we are talking about the employer perspective. We've spent a lot of time on our episodes talking about what employers are seeing, where they find troubles, and where they're really dealing with issues when it comes to their staffing and what they're providing to their employees. Today, we're going to switch things up a little bit. So I actually have somebody on today that I'm super excited to talk about, as I am always excited to talk to my guests. And I'm excited because this individual, her name is Jill Krysa, and she is going to be graduating very soon here from NC State University studying environmental science. And so I wanted to bring Jill on today because we're going to talk about the things that she's experiencing as a job seeker and also about some of those Gen Z rumors, these nasty things that I keep hearing. I want to give her a chance to stand up and say, y'all got it wrong. Gen Z is fucking awesome. So, without further ado, Jill, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you today because, like I said, we're going to talk about a different perspective a little bit. So, before I do that, why don't you just take a minute, tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been practicing my elevator speech all morning, so maybe I can give you that.
Okay, that's perfect.
All right, my name is Jill Krysa. I am a senior majoring in environmental science with a minor in sustainable materials and technology. I'm graduating spring 2025, so I'm looking for a full-time position. I grew up as a military kid. I was born in Japan and moved all over, so I'm very comfortable in new environments and I'm willing to relocate for work. I've been doing some work with an internship in sustainability with a garden and field work, lab work, research, all of that. And I even got to work with some drones and AI this week. And on top of that, I also work as a lifeguard. I teach CPR, first aid, AED, and swim lessons. And I just received the Purpose Built Award from there for my hard work. And then I just maintain my regular coursework with lab work in ecology, organic chemistry, environmental policy, ArcGIS, and a bunch of software.
Wow. So, you've got a whole lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, very busy.
Yeah. So I think that your elevator speech is good. You've talked about all these different things from your upbringing to what you're studying and what you're doing. I know that you've been hustling for a long time. And I heard you say that you are currently working as a lifeguard, but you've been doing that for a long time, right?
Yeah, this is gonna be my 8th summer, but 7th year lifeguarding if I stay on this year, depending on if I can get a full-time job. Yeah, so I've been working since I was able to, since I turned 15.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so that brings us to the first thing I want to talk about. And so I hear from employers and I read it in various HR publications and business newsletters and all that good stuff that Gen Z is just a bunch of lazy, good for nothing people who are just laying around and they're just eating bonbons and scrolling on their phones. So let me pause there. What do you think about that stereotype about Gen Z?
With any rumor stereotype, there probably is a little bit of truth. I've definitely seen it with some individuals in my classes where they maybe don't have the drive or ambition. But the majority of people I at least surround myself with, I know are hustlers, are out there trying their best, doing the work, having multiple jobs, balancing school and extracurriculars and work and internships. And I don't think it's true for everybody. And I think a lot of us are out here trying our best and to fit into this world and like the market that we are being handed right now from our predecessors and trying to somehow navigate a difficult path we've been handed.
I think you're right in the sense that in everything there's some truth. So, yes, are there some lazy slackers out there? Of course there are, but there are some lazy slacker adults out there too. So, it's not just Gen Z. But I'm glad to hear. And of course, I would think that anybody who's studying is you have to be hustling, like you have to be working hard. And so, I'm glad to hear you say that you've surrounded yourself and you know there's people out there who are really working and trying to do things and it's really about taking what you know and about what you want for the future and then figuring out how do you do that with kind of the current economic and labor market, which isn't your fault. You were coming up through that. You weren't necessarily contributing to that, although you have been contributing because you have been working for so long. So let's talk about some of those things a little bit more. So, one of the things that I hear that kind of ties into maybe some of that laziness is that people don't want to do the work that's available necessary. And what I think is happening is that younger generations, Gen Z in particular, and Gen Z, I didn't even say this, but Gen Z is ages 12 to 27. So this is people who are in high school, coming out of college, fresh grads. Like that's the Gen Z group. Although I'm not going to get into all the other generations, but just so I know, since we're saying Gen Z, that's who you are. But what I think is happening, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, is that some of the folks who are coming out now are more focused on the reasons that they are working, right? So it's like purpose driven. It's not just about the money, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit later, but that really it's like you want to be committed to making a change, doing what you're passionate about, like fueling kind of your internal flame while also living. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So I think there's a couple parts with that. First off, in the job market and applying and interviewing and going to career fairs right now, you're not allowed to just say, "Oh, I want a job to have a job," or "I want a job because I need a job and I need money and I'm a hard worker and I'll do anything." They want to know, why are you passionate? Why do you care? Are you going to commit to this and all of that?
So that is interesting. Like I'm because it's so funny because like I hear the like, well, nobody wants to work. And even if it's like they do their thing, but then they have to pick up the trash, like nobody wants to do anything. But it's interesting to hear that while I get that perspective, that when you go out there, you can't just be like, hire me because I need to eat and pay my rent. They are asking you, and you have to be prepared to say, why do you want to work there?
Yes, and it's like it's not enough because I'm passionate about environmental science. That's the career I want to pursue. I'm going to these companies. I really care. I make these changes in my life. I want to help make other changes worldwide, large scale, small scale. I don't care. This is my passion. I'll do anything to help it. And they're like, but you don't care enough about like water safety. Like you're not a niche enough for us right now. So like maybe you can come back once you have a master's maybe in water safety
Oh
specialties. It's
gosh.
like, oh, but I don't even know if I like it. Like I'm just trying to do my passion and figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point too, is that you're coming out and so you have this educational foundation, but not having necessarily all the real world experience. You want something where you have a little bit of exposure, and then you can decide if there's like a niche area you want to get into. I know, like for me, I've been in HR for more than 20 years, but over the last 5 years, and it's taken me that long to figure out like comp and pay equity. And that's where a lot of my focus is now. So it's like I love all the things about HR and like creating that win-win situation for employers and workers. But I also have that one piece that like that's what really gets like my juices flowing and gets me excited. So yeah, so I can see how it'd be the same thing for anybody coming out of school.
I wouldn't say it's the I don't want to work mentality. I feel like a lot of employers are asking a lot of recent grads. All the entry level jobs I'm applying to with pretty minimal salaries, like teacher level salaries for an entry level environmental scientists, are, do you have a master's? Do you have 5 to 8 years of experience under your belt with this, this, and this? And it just seems unrealistic for all these entry level jobs to be.
So what you're seeing when you look out there is that there's where they're looking for like the unicorn who's already got the master's degree and some experience, but it's really so that it's not an entry level job.
It doesn't feel like it should be marketed as entry level. A lot of the entry level positions I'm looking at are 3 years experience minimum, master's degree, have to have real world experiences and like 5 different certifications for it.
Yeah, so right there is already one of the points that I think is a huge disconnect. And I've talked about this on the employer side, and I've certainly seen it with employers, and that is getting the job description right. Like if it's truly entry level where they are willing to help grow, and you're going to have to grow somebody who's new because you don't have all the skills yet to do that work. You don't know everything yet. But it really, that job description needs to say like the experience and the real world practical stuff really has to match what the expectations for the job are. And it could be like, this is a nice to have. Like, we'd like to have somebody who has a little bit more experience. But if it's truly entry level, the job descriptions have to say that. So I think that's something that I hear from employers is that they get frustrated because they put jobs out there and then the people that are applying for it don't have the right skill set. So I'm hearing it on your side as well. So the ask to employers is get your job descriptions right, be accurate about what you're really looking for, and then for the job seekers, I think the advice is okay, if that's a job where you meet the minimum qualifications, go after it. Versus if you see something that's like, we're requiring a master's in 8 years, like, that's not you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like be real on both sides.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, I totally see that. I totally see that. One of the other things that I hear is that the Gen Zs are just they're snowflakes, right? Like they're so emotional and they're hard to manage because like they don't want to be told if they're doing something bad. What do you think about that?
Me personally, I know I can accept feedback, and I feel like I have been raised with that, with levels of feedback and expectations and goals that need to be met and stuff needs to be done. And once you make a commitment, you're stuck with it. So I do feel like part of it is upbringing. And I know in my work as a lifeguard, I feel like there is a new disconnect with how parents are raising their children and just with like rules and standards and regulations. And if a facility has a certain set of rules, parents are getting upset because they want their kids to do whatever they want and live however they want. When I know when I was a kid, like if the lifeguard said no, it was no. Or like if someone like in the neighborhood stopped me and told me like, hey, I need to like watch where I'm riding my bike, it was very like, yes, you're right. I'm so sorry. And I feel like there is a little bit more of a disconnect with that now.
It's kind of funny to hear you say that because I feel like that's like this I feel like it's the same thing, and just because you have that, like, the lifeguard experience to pull from, it seems that, like, it's just everybody who gets a little bit of experience in that space where you are enforcing rules, like, then you see how it trickles down. So it's like what you're saying about some of these younger kids who are coming and, like, their parents' response to you, then it's also like you're saying, like, "I see it," and that's the same way that some of the people in the workforce are talking about like your generation coming in. So it's kind of funny. It just like trickles down. What I think though, like when I think about it's about this idea that like you're also emotional and so sensitive. I don't necessarily view that as a negative though. So like from my perspective, one, when it comes to performance management, one, I think the employers, it's in their approach. Like hold people accountable. People want to know what's expected of them. And if they're doing it wrong, they might be doing the wrong thing because they thought they were doing the right thing or they just don't know. So I think it's in the approach. I don't think employers should be afraid to either have like disciplinary action if it gets to that level, but certainly in just educating people because they don't all know what to do and they don't know what they don't know yet. So I think there's that. But I also think there's a positive in the sense that having better awareness around both mental health, but just general emotional intelligence. To me, that's a positive. Like, I don't see that as like, oh, these snowflakes who are so sensitive. I see that as like, if you have something customer facing, or let's say it's a water and some sort of passion project, like, you probably have greater empathy for people knowing like, hey, I grew up and I always had access to clean water, but I'm passionate about this work because other people don't have that or whatever the thing is. So I feel like the emotional intelligence, I mean, to me, that's a positive. And I think it's a shift. We need a little bit of a shift there from the employer side.
Yeah, I think it probably also helps make a more positive overall work environment with like coworker relations and making sure there's comfortability and no crazy power dynamics going or like anxious, stressful relationships. We're a lot more inner focused, but I think it can be a benefit, not just robots working in a factory. Like,
Yes, let's all just be robots. Yeah, when I can implant that chip and like just be the robot, like I'm gonna go for it. But I don't know if it's gonna happen in my lifetime or not. So, one of the things that I also hear about is that as people are coming out, that they are just in general unprepared for work. Now, I know that you have had some work experience as a lifeguard from the earliest that you can, and then you've talked about some different internships and experiences that you've had. So, one of the things that I hear from employers is that people come in, they don't necessarily know what's expected in, let's say, a more traditional work environment. And so they are offering like whether mandatory or voluntary, like office etiquette classes or setting like kind of expectations for the workplace. What do you think about something like that? Like, how do you think you would feel if you went into an environment and they were like, all right, Jill, every Friday morning, you got to come to business etiquette class?
I think that can just be a benefit. Whether it is mandatory or voluntary, I do feel like I've never had office work experience. I don't know the standards of how I need to be emailing professionally all the way. What is the level of like casuality, like informalness allowed in a setting? Like I have work experience it, but it is not the typical office field lab work. And I do think that would be helpful for everybody. And I know there are like workshops and classes and that at my university at least, and there's a lot of like career prep happening to try to shape us to be solid office workers.
Again, it's just a disconnect issue because, like, again, I hear from employers, people come in, they don't know how to work, they don't know how to be an employee, they don't know how to send an email, they don't know all of these different things. And certainly I've had my own experiences coming up where I've seen people where I'm like, oh my God, like they can't do that here. Like, what are they doing? Right. But if they don't know, so it's also nice to then hear you saying that, yeah, you're aware you don't know. And so, if there are opportunities for organizations to work with other folks in Gen Z who are entering the workplace, yes, develop them, teach them. You all know that that's a new experience.
Specifically on the internet, I feel like my generation, grew up very informal on the internet, and the internet was to connect with people and interact and all of that, but not in the typical like send an email office level type of communication electronically. So I feel like there are just different standards in different areas of life that need to be expressed.
Yeah, communication is one again that I hear like, well, people don't know how to communicate, but I think a lot of that is generational, not just with your generation, but all generations. Like, and I think this also has an impact on the whole remote work thing, and that is, do you prefer to communicate in person? Are you doing something face to face? And to your point, I think we've really moved away from that, where we have a lot more informal, like we have a lot more texting, even like outside of even email or like Slack or chat or whatever it is, where we're not like, it's changing and tools are changing.
Yeah, how coworker interaction can you be like, oh, did you catch the game last night versus is this just work? Do I need to sign my name at the end of everything? Like, how strict is the punctuation? Is this supposed to be more like water cooler talk, or can is this just for work?
Yeah, I think it's hard, and even with, as somebody who's had an extensive career, sometimes it is hard, and the cultures really can vary, where some may be a little bit more buttoned up, and others you can have that more, like, jovial, like, casual conversation. What do you think maybe for yourself and maybe in general, I know you can't speak for every Gen Zer out there, what do you think is your preferred communication style?
In my day to day life, a text. I don't want to call. I just want a quick text that I can respond to at my leisure. I would say for work, I would prefer to work in person and do stuff like that. But if I have to do like an electronic, it would be an email. I would like to prioritize my like work life balance. So be able to put that email down at the end of the day and not be expected to have my phone on till.
Okay, I have to stop you because there's two things that you have said that we must talk about. You said that you like some in person and working with people. What? Like, this is shocker because this is what I hear. Like, nobody wants to come to an office anymore. Nobody wants to be in person. So tell me more about that. Why do you think there's some value in being in person?
I think especially for my generation, the COVID high school generation, we saw the extent of like the isolation, how far can you get without seeing other people. And I think for a lot of us that's not what we expected. And that's not the dream I've had since I was a little kid when I was thinking about getting my first job. I wasn't expecting to be in my house alone, having no interactions with other coworkers. I want to have happy hour with my coworkers. I want to make connections. I want to have positive social relationships with people in my environment. And I would like hybrid could be nice because I do know there are times that stuff comes up and like later down my life when I have other priorities or a family or things like that, I would love to have the option to have a hybrid, but I do value the human connection that comes with in person, especially with like the rise of AI and other types of technology today, where a lot of stuff is being robot interaction.
I think that's so interesting, like, just to hear you talk about well, one, like, that some hybrid could be nice, but I hadn't even contemplated the idea that, like, you came out of high school in COVID where you were isolated, and so you didn't get to have all of those experiences, and so now you want to have them as you're entering your career, and the happy hour and kickball and some of the team building that goes along with working with people.
Yeah, that sounds ideal for me. I feel like a lot of my generation is a little more isolated now, and you can see that in like mental health levels and anxiety levels. We don't interact with each other as much as we should. And if we do, it's very parasocial.
I'm gonna use this now when employers are like, "Nobody wants to come in," I'm gonna be like, "Well, have you thought about the perspective that these kids came up during COVID and they're actually missing that connection and they actually want it?"
And all of our connections are so digital. A lot of, like, I have a lot of friends and I talk to them regularly. How much of that is a DM on social media versus how much of that is like in person quality time? So I just do value that in person connection. And it also feels more rewarding and more like fulfilling work than online. Even doing my classes online sometimes feels so disconnected. I'm like, yeah, I'm reading this, I'm learning, but do I feel that like environmental part of it?
Yeah, I think that that's so good. I think that's really interesting, and I think that's something that, will certainly help me when I talk to employers just to help kind of break some of those stereotypes right now. One of the other things that you said that you thought was important to you is the idea of kind of that work life effectiveness. And I don't call it
Mm-hmm.
balance. Historically, we've talked about it as work life balance, where it's like you shut off at work and then you're like, you're at home and it's these separate things. So, from my perspective, it's effectiveness because we are so digitally connected to everything. So that when you go home at the end of the day, figuring out like, do you disconnect or are you still checking email? And so, maybe there's some less expectation. I think it's going to depend on the organization, but talk to me more about how you view work life effectiveness and why does that matter to you?
In my ideal situation, like, yes, I would like to have positive relationships with my coworkers, with my bosses, with everybody. But I also would like to go home at the end of the day and I would like to not respond to a million emails because I'm not working anymore. I'm no longer clocked in. I would like to have my own time and my own life. And for me, working is, it's not like you have to work. Nobody wants to work. I would like to like my job, but I would also like to be able to go home and do my own thing and hang out with my friends and walk my dog and have my own fulfilling life and just use work as work instead of all encompassing.
So your life is a little bit and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
fuller in the sense that one, you have a job that while it meets the needs that you need to have is also something that's fulfilling to you and that you enjoy both
Yeah.
in the work and the relationships, but then also just to have success with your own family and your own friends and
Yes. I would like to have that separated balance. I would like to, I'm good at work, but once I'm out of work, work is work. And now I can be like fun Jill who does her hobbies and has her relationships and has
yeah.
friends
You
and
want to do it all. Same thing. I want to be amazing at Gorilla HR, but I also want to be like an amazing wife and dog mom. So, yeah, I want it all.
yeah.
And I want it all for everybody else after me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I have just a couple more questions, and that's kind of related to the process. So, when it comes to job seeking, so one of the things that I hear from the employer side is that applicants ghost them, that they have an interview scheduled and then they don't show up for the interview, or maybe they have an interview and there's a follow up question and then they don't hear anything back. So, I'm curious from your job seeking experience, how would you describe your experience as a seeker?
I would say it's the other way around. I have gotten fully formally dressed, took an hour, done my hair, done my makeup, cleaned my room so I can have a nice background to have an interview in, gotten set up at like 9 in the morning before my classes, and then they don't show up. And I don't have a way to contact them. They were supposed to contact me. So I get an email an hour later. Oh, sorry, something came up. Can we reschedule? I've had so many interviews get pushed and pushed and pushed. I am on it. I am emailing anything they ask me, any response. I want a job. I have 2 months till I graduate. I want a job. Like, I will not be the one to ghost. I will annoy you until I if I've already sent an email back and I'm waiting for their response and it's been 2 or 3 days, I'll send another follow up. Hey, just checking in. Like, just want to touch base. Are we still good for this or that? Like,
So again, it's just let's add it to our list of like a huge disconnect because like what I hear from the employers is then also what's happening on the job seeker side. So, and I would think for organizations who are looking for people as well as the person who's looking for the job, like if somebody does ghost you or blows you off or has like a last minute cancellation, what does that say about like the culture of that organization? I know you're still in this space where you're like, well, I need a job, so like I'm going to deal with that. But you might, I don't know. If it were me, I'd go into being more like, oh, well, yes, I need a job and maybe this organization is okay. But if this is how they treat me at this stage, how are they going to treat me once I'm there?
Yeah, and I've had poor relationships with like bosses and managers in the past. So now I feel like I'm looking more for it of, are you going to respect me? Is this going to be a healthy work relationship? Will I feel like just used when I'm needed and abandoned when I'm not?
But it's finding that balance too of like, what is that relationship? Like, we won't go into the specific details of these situations, but yeah, it's kind of that like, what does that mutual respect look like?
Yes, like how do we maintain professional boundaries?
Thank you for coming on and chatting with me. So, essentially, what I've heard is there is just a disconnect between the stereotypes of employers saying that Gen Z is coming in and they don't know how to be good employees. And so they're failing and they're not fitting in and they're not conforming. And so organizations are like figuring out, well, now we got to get rid of this person and replace them. But what I'm hearing from your side then, that the disconnect piece is that you all know that you need learning and you all know that you want to be in person, you want to learn things, build relationships, and you are totally open to that etiquette coaching, to that professional coaching that's going to say, there are things you need to learn in order to be successful. And so it can happen. It's just that the organizations need to put a little time in. So it's both ways, just saying like, we've got things to teach, you all have things to learn, and we can be successful.
Even if there was like a training week where we just can go over everything, all the responsibilities, every expectation, they just need to be laid out and we can meet them.
From the employer side, they should be setting clear expectations. Then, if you're not conforming, it becomes a performance issue. But if the expectations aren't clear to start, then you don't know. And again, you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
Well, Jill, I certainly wish you all of the best of luck in finding an amazing position. I hope that you get that job that is satisfying to you from the work standpoint, as well as financially takes care of you and gives you that opportunity to continue to grow and develop in your personal life as well. So, best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Gorilla HR podcast. And I look forward to chatting with you all again soon.
That's it for this episode of the Gorilla HR podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@gorilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time.